bum. Have we here what you put it in love? See, this Studio B. See, these are here. Gaga, whoever can hang out, Britney, Whitney, will.i.am, Jay-Z, yeah, 50, that, Freddie Mercury, yeah, this one, that's just Maestro. Not here. Is it over here? Or is it over there? Where's it gone? Where's it gone? It's not over there. I can't get through here. Yeah, reflective surfaces, as you can see, nigga. Yes, we keep it real. Where the magic takes place. Fucking Captain Kirk. Engaged. No, can't get anywhere, amigos. Shit. No. Oh well. Yeah, look. Chop, 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 chop. Tim Burton script. David Mamet Tales from the Crypt, with legs in black tights that slightly ripped, darkness be gripped, with the four horses of the apocalypse love to be whipped.
My lord, if I could get all the wealth in the world, would it help me to go beyond death? Not at all. You would live and die like any other rich person. No one can buy immortality with money. Of what use then are money and material possessions to me? Please tell me, my lord, the way that leads to immortality. You have always been dear to me, and I love you even more now that you have asked me about immortality. Sit here by my side and reflect deeply on what I say. A wife loves her husband, not for his own sake, dear, but because the self lives in him. A husband loves his wife, not for her own sake, dear, but because the self lives in her. Children are loved not for their own sake, but because the self lives in them. Wealth is loved not for its own sake, but because the self lives in it. Brahmins are loved not for their own sake, but because the self lives in them. The universe is loved not for its own sake, but because the self lives in it. The gods are loved not for their own sake, but because the self lives in them. Creatures are loved not for their own sake, but because the self lives in them. Everything is loved not for its own sake, but because the self lives in it. This self has to be realized. Hear about the self and meditate upon it. When you hear about the self, meditate upon the self, and finally realize the self, you come to understand everything in life. For Brahmins confuse those who regard them as separate from the self. The universe confuses those who regard it as separate from the self. Gods and creatures confuse those who regard them as separate from the self. Everything confuses those who regard things as separate from the self. Brahmins, creatures, the universe, the gods, everything. These are the self. No one can understand the sound of a drum without understanding both drum and drummer, or the sounds of a conch without understanding both the conch and its blower, or the sounds of a violin without understanding both violin and violinist.